Hello, everybody. Welcome to our first panel of the conference. We're going to be focusing on data, however you'd like to say it, today. And without further ado, I am going to introduce my co-moderator in this panel, Mr. Steve Wanamaker.
How's everyone? Well, hello. How's everyone doing today? All right. Is everybody ready to learn some things about data and to grow your careers and to have some cool stuff about technology? That's why we're here today, right? Okay. So I'm Steve Wanamaker. I'm the CEO and publisher of Chief Data Officer Magazine. CDO Magazine's read in 176 countries. We have a global audience of 350,000, and we have an editorial board in 20 different nations. And when the team at Princeton was nice enough to fly to Cincinnati and ask me to participate in this conference, I was very honored to do that. And so what I did was I asked some of our team, who is a part of our, who are either on our editorial board or members of our global community that live in the New York City area, to participate today and be on it. So we have these wonderful people here. So I'm going to turn it over to Fletcher, and he is going to take it from now.
Hello, everybody. Again, I'm Fletcher. I am a student at Princeton University studying sociology. I am Business Today's International Conference Assistant Director of Logistics, and I'm from San Diego, California. So to begin, I think we would all love to thank our collective panel for being here today. We really appreciate your time, your presence, and all of the knowledge that you are about to share with us. And so with that, it would be amazing if we could go down the panel and you guys could all introduce yourself with your name, your title, your company, and a fun question, data or data?
So you will hear in this already, I have an accent, so asking me how to pronounce something. My daughter does it. She was born here. She went to college here. She sometimes, Mom, how do I pronounce this? Like, are you asking me? I can tell you what it means and how you use it in a sentence. But anyway, so
I think that just adds to the fun.
Yes. So I'm Julia Bardmesser. I am a head of data enterprise architecture and CRM at Voya Financial. I've been in this industry for a really long time, and mostly financial and around data analytics and cross-platform technology development and support. And I say data.
Hi, Santha Ramakrishnan. I am the Global Data Governance Lead for R&D in Sanofi Pharmaceutical. And I come to this role with an interesting collection of experiences from PhD to product development in startup companies, business development in startup companies, and then management consulting, and then inside a pharma. So it's a good experience, a very rich experience that helps me that I tap into very often. Data or data, I say data, but the more important thing is the is or the are after that. Is data is or data are? And the more correct ones would say data are, because there are many points. A data set is, but data are.
Thank you for that. Hello, everyone. I'm Gaurav Shah. I'm also part of Sanofi, but I'm leading data and analytics globally for our consumer healthcare business unit. I was just thinking outside that it's such a nice thing to meet everybody face to face, but now sitting here, I think Zoom is better because I have to see this. On Zoom, everybody's on the front. But now, happy to be here, and I would go with data. I think that works for everyone. Understanding, easy, simple. Thank you.
Great. You guys can hear me? All right, we're sharing mics, so let me know if the mics ever go out. My name's Dan Merzlyak. I'm a director in BlackRock's Aladdin practice, leading the data migration practice and various other private market business intelligence efforts. Based out of Brooklyn, also just want to echo the sentiments, really excited to be here and see everyone in person. It's data. Yeah, it's definitely data.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ben Blanquera. I am with Rackspace Technology, and I am the accidental data guy. I'm a recovering CIO and have been in a lot of startups and enterprise things, and started in the applications kind of world, and in the last 7 years have been doing data and analytics, because ultimately that's what applications create, is data, and then it's what you do with it.
Thank you, Ben. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Anusha Dandapani. I'm the Chief of Data and Analytics Practice that we have at United Nations International Computing Center. So UN as an organization has multiple units or entities. So I belong to an entity called International Computing Center. And in this unit, my focus is to support all our UN partner agencies with their data needs. And before I joined the UN, and that's before the COVID happened, I used to work for financial services, focusing on using data and AI, ML in the decision-making process in the financial markets. For me, I would, just for the kick of it, I would say data. The reason being, the word data comes from the Sanskrit meaning data. Data means to give. So data gives meaning and the value and the insight. So that's why it's spelled data, but pronounced data.
You win.
You won that one.
Well, thank you very much, and it is great to meet you all and to hear your stance on the most important word of the panel. Our first question to whoever would like to start is, why is the business of data important to business?
I'm going to start, and I'm going to stick to data. I'm sorry, because if I start thinking too much about pronunciation, I will not think all that much about what I'm talking about. So assuming everybody understands when I say data, that's what I mean. So I actually did a little bit of research for this question, because even, when you live in New York, it seems like everybody in the world does financial services, and that's actually not true. So I was wondering, in financial services, I think it's easier to understand why you need data and how do you use it, or at least it's kind of more commonly accepted, with some exceptions. So I reached out. I have friends who run global manufacturing company, so not digital at all. They produce batteries. And so I called them today, and he's a CEO and she's a CFO, and I asked, off the top of your mind, I didn't ask the question the way it's written, what's the problem you think about? It's well, the first one is stability, viability of the business. I said, okay, can you tell me a little more what it means? He said, well, first, it's retention of the customers that I have, it's acquisition of the new customers, and it's controlling the cost of my business. So I think for panel here, this is all data. Retention of the customers, what is the customer experience, how do they like the products they have, how many returns they have. There's so many questions. It's all data-driven inside. The same acquisition of the customers and obviously cost controls, the more efficiency you have, the more metrics you have, it's all around data. Now, the interesting piece was the second piece. He said, the way he built his business, he created his business case out of executive MBA program. So he's a big fan. He's always told me how much he enjoyed it and how incredibly helpful it was for him. This program was for him to start his own business. But he said, one of the things I'm recognizing now is that the old ways of acquiring the customers stop working for whatever reason. So unless you have a personal relationship with somebody, it's he doesn't know how to get their attention and bring their products to that to get the attention. And interestingly enough, this is also a data problem. This is data feeding analytics, data science, on figuring out what touch points work for a specific set of customers. It's data segmentations. It's all of the cool stuff you hear about data science. Obviously, you need to have data to have good results from your data science, but that's also a data problem. What she said was actually, well, she is worried about being paid. So how their customers pay, do they pay on time, who is late, who is on time, lifetime value of the customer. It's also a data problem. So to answer why is data important to the business, and this is a business, again, this is non-digital business. They produce physical things. Data is vitally important to the main questions the CEO and CFO of the company are asking themselves. They may not translate it that way. That's my job. And I think a lot of people on this panel, that's the major, like if you look at my LinkedIn, one of the things I say, translator. So that's the main job, is translate the business problems into data, in how data capabilities and analytics capabilities can solve it. But pretty much any problem business has, underlying solution, you need to have data capabilities or analytics.
This is very good, actually. If I can just add one thing, it's not about business of data. I would say data is business. It impacts every division of the organization, and we as leaders are evaluated based on how effectively we can use data to turn it into insights and then into proper decision making. So every part of our business, be it consumer engagement, be it marketing, be it commercial, in finance, everywhere, it's all about how effectively you use data. So it's actually data is business.
Yeah. Just to extend. Just to extend that analogy to some parts of business that people traditionally don't think of as business, right? R&D is also business. It is the core of any business. Anyone that's making new products, there is a division called R&D, whether you make toothpaste or you make Tylenol, right? All of those companies have an R&D. And in something like pharmaceutical R&D, for example, the data that you gather will tell you which patients where is this medicine most effective? Is there a genetic profile for that patients where it's most effective, tolerated well, and some where it is not? That is the scientific end of it. Then manufacturing. A lot of manufacturing in pharmaceuticals depends on, is reliant on data. Which formulations work well, which formulations can be applied on your skin versus taken orally versus anything else. To withstand room temperatures, the COVID vaccine, for instance. It always requires shipment at sub-zero temperatures. So what is science trying to do? Making COVID vaccines that ship at room temperatures so you can access areas that do not have these facilities of sub-zero temperatures. So it's the heart of the business in any business. Without that data, you cannot get those insights on any part of your business, be it the commercial side, be it the R&D sides, or even people management. Right? HR gets a lot of data. Which levels need more help, or which kinds of talent should we attract, or how should our LinkedIn profiles work to attract folks like you, right? That is also data. So without all of that data, this world of being agile, being constantly there, serving every kind of need, is probably going to be very difficult without data.
Yep, so I'm just gonna pile on to all the great things that were said. I think you'll notice that folks have alluded to that data drives insights. Data by itself has no value if it doesn't reveal anything, right? So I just wanna add another dimension to this conversation of business of data. I think of that from two perspectives. One is how do you leverage data to drive operational insights and drive business value internally? And two, how do you become a data business? So there's companies that actually sell data and use data to provide customer-facing products, whether the products are B2C or B2B, right? So whether they're driving decisions for consumers like you and me using their apps, or whether it's another enterprise buying it to drive their own decisions, et cetera. So maybe just equate that to an analogy. So in a prior life, I created a model that identified high quality sales opportunities for our salespeople, and we combined internal data, so data from our customer relationship management system, our CRM system, our people data, things like tenure, et cetera, from all these other sources, et cetera, and we create this predictive model, and we use it to identify high quality pipeline opportunities and focus our sales efforts. A data company will take that type of prescriptive analytics and then package it and sell it to other customers, other clients that can leverage some of the work that I did in a prior life, and that's how they build a business out of it. And so just wanted to highlight that, in a lot of our daily lives, there's companies that are leveraging data every single day to make our lives easier, as well as harnessing for other companies that are involved in our lives. So, if you guys ever want to buy a home in a future life, although with these interest rates, I don't know when that's going to be possible, but you guys might use an app like Zillow, and Zillow is based on data, so it'll look at, prior data points around house prices and how they've sold, and you'll want to see, well, hey, I'm not overpaying for this house because it was sold 2 years ago for X value, and that's another data point. So data points and data is integrated into all of our lives.
It sucks being at the end of the line.
Not yet.
All right. So the only amazing insight perhaps that I could share regarding this data thing is at the end of the day, enterprises are people, and data only serves for people to be able to answer questions. And so as we think about the creation of value in how we grow, whether it's value for the consumer, value for your enterprise, or value for the community and the environment, it all comes down to people making decisions based on things they know or don't know. And so when I think about data, I think about data as being a fuel for better decision making. And our job is to make sure that we tee up that information so people can inherently take advantage of the goodness that's within them to make good decisions if they have context. So that would be how I think about data, because it's all about how we make decisions every day based on the things we know or don't know.
For me, the way we use data in the business of what we do, I just want to clarify, because UN, as an organization, for us, the priorities when it comes to using data in things like, say, climate action, gender equality, trying to understand peace and security, human rights. These are such big topics that we want to consider data helping us drive those decisions on how those policies are structured, how are those use cases that we are going to serve in future. So for us, data is at the core of what we do. And second, data is the new oil. And the way the oil kind of serves the need of our electricity is how data serves our functions within an organization. And electricity is the value that you bring to the organization through the oil of data that you can drive insights from. So these are such high vocabulary words that we are throwing at you, saying driving insights, driving value. End of the day, if data helps you make better decisions, you have driven the value out of data. Yeah.
All right, that was Well, great job, everybody. I like to ask the second question, and Anusha, we'll let you go first. We don't want Ben down there crying because he's last. So, could you give some examples of how your organization is leveraging data to drive value and outcomes?
So I think it pretty much goes back to the previous topic that I just shared. See, we at the UN focus on a problem-driven approach. What we mean by problem is very much around the lines how Ben structured it in a way that, like, what questions are you trying to answer? In our case, we are very much focused on what problems are we trying to solve where data is necessary for us to drive. And problem-driven approach comes in 2-3 ways, right? Like, one, you have to understand, is your organization ready, capable? Do you have enough people who understand data, who can understand how to drive value from data? And the second aspect of it is the technology by itself, right? Like, not everybody has access to the technology as an enabler. If you realize that if you end up having to access to the model that he was talking about, wherein, like, you can optimize better as to how your sales would look like, not everybody has access to those sort of enablers, if you may. So how do you make sure that the organization by itself is enabled in the decision-making process when it comes to people, process, and technology is one of the value driver that we do focus on. But to answer your question, we focus on problem-driven approach. Yeah.
We just completed a really cool project, water. You turn that faucet, water comes out, you assume it's clean, you assume it's available. Guess what? That doesn't happen in a lot of places.
It does in New York.
Well, I'm in a country. and so throughout the country and the world, there is a company that provides essentially water monitoring and the running of water purification. And many of you have heard there's a thing called a drought that's happening right now, right? So water and the value of it continues to grow pretty significantly. And so we completed a project that worked with this organization to, one, figure out what is the network by which we collect data from the equipment, essentially, and create a massive data lake associated with that. Two, then, how do we create models to create predictions regarding when things are going to work or not work? And then three, how do we create systems of engagement with the folks who are going to use that information so they can actually do something with that? And so that was a pretty cool project to work with because of its scale and its impact. And so when you think about data and water, how do they interact? Well, if those plants don't actually work, guess what? You don't have your water. So that was a cool project.
So for me, I'll again focus on the dichotomy of using data internally versus data as part of your go-to-market strategy. So for BlackRock, I'm on the side of the business that's customer facing. So what we need to do is we need to be able to manage our deal flow, our deals, where we sell our Aladdin product, but we also need to manage our capacity planning so that we can have the resources to execute. So how would you guys go about solving that from a data perspective? On one side, you have your customer relationship management information, where you track your deals and you can track when they're going to close and what type of deals they are. And on the other side, you have your people, right? And so you have how many people you have, what their capacity is based on what they're already staffed on, and then how do you create a process to link the two? So BlackRock has, call it an algorithm, that leverages all this information and creates a model where we can accurately staff our people. So just one example of how we leverage data for internal staffing decisions. On the other hand, BlackRock sells data, and it also sells the ability for our customers to leverage data to make investment decisions. So for me, I'm focused on the private market side, but for example, we have our alternatives platform, which is part of Aladdin, and essentially that will enable private equity firms to go in, track their deals, track investment returns on their deals, all these IRR terms that you guys probably in your business classes are learning right now or familiar with, and also use our platform as a single source of truth for any investor reporting. So, it'll also automate and streamline from one system that aggregates all the data and then provides all the investor notices, et cetera. So those two kind of aspects of how we use data in everyday decisions.
That's great. I don't know how I'll top the UN and the water examples, but because we are in the New York City, I'll just stay with the finance as well here. We have a really flagship product, which is an AI-based data product where we consolidate data from more than 135 countries on a daily basis for all of our financials that are happening. So imagine for a second how effective this could be to really make a company transform to a transparent and more trustworthy, right? When a CFO sitting in France is looking at a particular number and he calls up Argentina, the head of finance there, and says, I see this is happening in Argentina, can you confirm? And that person is watching and looking at the exact same application or data product and can see what's exactly happening and answer those questions. So that level of transparency can only be brought if you have this kind of insight into what data you're processing. And having said that, it doesn't have to always be an AI or a ML-based application. Just getting your foundations right and having even strong descriptive analytics is sometimes game-changing. So AI, DS, ML, yeah, sure. I mean, the modeling, simulation, prediction, the COVID actually threw away half of the models, if not more, because we have lost all of our historical data, tracking. But saying that, there are a number of examples where you could see how data really can help. And I'll just stop with that one example.
Good. Thank you, everybody. I want to move to the next question so we can get some different thoughts and perspectives. So our next question is talking about the opportunity for data to be a catalyst for a better society through ESG, as organizations and governments strive to embrace data for good. So very open-ended conversation about your thoughts on that.
I guess I'll, okay, it's working. So I work for a financial company, but it's a good, and Voya Financial, what it does is helps people save money for retirement and helps to additionally insure any type of accident, so it's additional insurance. And that's where my example is. So first, I mean, this is an interesting crowd here. I don't know how many of you actually had to sign up for medical insurance plan. Do parents do that? Yes. I mean, do you know generally, right, that there, in this country, you have, generally your insurance comes through your employer, and once a year you have to choose your medical insurance plan for next year, and there's certain types of coverages, and when if something happens and you go to a hospital, you have to provide your insurance. So you're familiar with all of that, right? So what people less familiar about, and I can say till I got to Voya, I really didn't pay much attention, there are additional coverages you can choose. And that's actually one of the products that Voya provides, which is accidental, some kind of coverage for accidents. What happens is, because it's not the main medical coverage, people tend to sign up for it, and it's not usually very expensive, and sometimes employers pay for it, so it's really not in your consciousness that day to day, and accidents, generally speaking, don't happen every day. When you have an accident, you go to a hospital, you use your medical insurance, and you forget that you have a separate coverage. So think of it from the company perspective. We make money on premiums, and we pay out money when people file the claim. So you would think that if people didn't file the claim or forgot to file a claim, we'd be happy about it. So that's why ESG, the reason it's an ESG answer. So what Voya came up with, actually the whole, and a lot of it is data-driven process, is to get information, obviously with the consent of people and the companies, to get their medical claims information, match it against the coverage that they have through the supplemental insurance, figure out whether there is a claim that's appropriate, and pay out the money and just send the check. So kind of think about, when I realized, like, we were obviously involved because that's a data program and a lot of matching, a lot of data work underneath. And I went to the business and like, why are you doing this? You're basically trying to pay out more money than you would have otherwise. And it's a DNA of the company. This is like, that's what we want to do, right? That's why we sell those products. We want to help people do this. And if we lose money, we'll adjust our premiums and we'll do the businessy things, but we will not try to cheat people out of money. We'll actually give people money. And some of it, at some of our meetings, we had a phone call to the call center played from a guy who said, I got this check for $15,000. What is this? Is this real? Is somebody trying to scam me? And they go through this whole conversation. No, sir. It's not a scam. You had this insurance. You had an accident, right? Right. And your insurance covered that. And that's a claim, and we recognize that, and we sent you a check. It's a real check. You can go ahead and cash it. It's not a scam. Listening to, like, the guy was floored. It was so wonderful to listen to this because, we all did this. So anyway, so that's kind of in the financial services, which you don't often think of us as ESG, right? Especially the, headlines and everything. That, this happens. And that's a big product for us.
So I think the topic of ESG is often, related to what's your carbon footprint? Are you recycling? And these kinds of things. But there is a world of ESG beyond, as Julia rightly described. And in the pharmaceutical sector, so for example, we run clinical trials. And every clinical trial costs upwards of $1 billion now. And every clinical trial, taking a product to market costs upwards of $1 billion now. And then you're recruiting patients, and COVID taught us that sometimes that whole chain of recruiting patients, going to sites and getting people enrolled in these trials may suddenly not happen. So what is the next best way of doing it? Using data. How can you supplement, do innovative clinical trial designs without people, not without people, with lesser people? How can you effectively design your trials ahead of time and say, to run this trial, I may need to do this, simulate some, do some, reduce the number of patients we really truly need, and still come to the same conclusions as we want our hypothesis to deliver. So that in itself is a kind of ESG. You have reduced the number of FedEx shipments of clinical supplies. You have reduced patient burden, the number of miles, and the carbon footprint associated with bringing those patients. Not to count the fact that you probably brought a drug to market faster than before. So that is one kind of ESG that I think of, and beyond in these data practices. So pharmaceutical R&D is a lot of good, and I lead data value and data reuse within Sanofi, which is really unlike other places where you think of the whole continuum from where should I store the data to how should I analyze the data. Pharmaceuticals, or any science for that matter, many people have the algorithms. The data to throw at the algorithms is more scarce, and and how do you and policies that that restrict the use of data and several policies. So how do you strategically deliver data to problems is what this thing, the initiative it is that I'm leading about. How do you derive more value from all these years of trials that we have locked away in data centers all over the world? How do we unlock value from all of that? And that is an ESG problem, because there you're saving them. It's all power, electricity, air conditioning, everything that goes into keeping that data there, but you're not really unlocking the value over there. That is one kind of ESG. And related to that is every time people record data in any business really, you will record a lot of data. You don't know, do you really need this or not? And when you accumulate all of that data, you're storing space, again, the whole ESG trail starts. So there are efforts within all of the businesses that we do where we trace the life of data across a business process and say, are we capturing unnecessary data? How are we really using it? Are we capturing data, the really valuable data, or capturing unnecessary data, which is nowadays, I think there's a theme called dark data, where really data are locked away and serves no purpose. So these are some things related to ESG that we are, and many of you may not come to pharma probably, or may, but these are common problems across the various industries. And I think if there's one thing that it'd be nice to share is every new industry that you pick up, even if you didn't have that intent, maybe look for these common problems and common solutions.
Sure. I don't know if we have time to continue answering this question. All right, sorry. This is the benefit of sitting in the center. I can answer from there and there, right? So, but I'm from Sanofi as well. So whatever Santha said is all relevant. But at the same time, also today we can actually track these things. And the reason we could do that, we can actually collect these data, we can actually follow up on it. A few years back, ESG was just a concept, or it was probably just theoretical in Excel files somewhere. Yeah, approximately we are buying that much aluminum, fine, we can process it, not a problem. But today we can do this. We can actually get the data, we can actually digitize it, we can track it, and the governments can actually put policies on organizations and corporations to actually make it better. So every one of us in organizations, companies, countries, everywhere has this social responsibility to make sure ESG is part of your priorities in the company. So I wouldn't go into too much of details. I'll leave it at there, and I'll let others.
Yeah. So I think to Gaurav's point, the examples shown have been great so far. So I won't go into too much details on additional examples, but I'll just say that I don't think in ESG data is at the point where it needs to be. And there's a lot more that could be done on it. And as Gaurav alluded to, there's going to be a lot more being done because of regulatory requirements. We've already seen some regulatory requirements in the EU that have certain metrics that they want companies to be accountable for and also be transparent about. And there isn't really a very good global standard right now, which causes a lot of confusion about what data needs to be stored, translated, and communicated out publicly. So as those guidelines get structured better, there's going to be a big opportunity here for companies to get the data they need organized, possibly even a commercial opportunity for many companies to provide that data. So I think there's a lot more to be done in this space, and it's going to come fairly quickly.
I just want to, ESG, environmental society, government, is really a reflection of the values of society. And so when we think about ESG, it starts out with what does the society care about that it wants to drive action. And as was said earlier, this is a very big emerging field because our society is changing pretty significantly. So I think we can get to the tactical, what do you measure and how do you measure it, but I really believe that there's a ton of opportunity in the what's the policy that drives the outcomes we're trying to create, because then that will say what do you need to measure to create transparency and accountability. So this is very much an emerging kind of field. And I do think, I mean, you all in the room are going to have a huge impact because you all are the emerging society. But it starts out with being an advocate for the policy to drive the action.
Some of the use cases that we are currently focused on for data for good or ESG would be definitely targeted use cases to drive policies, programs, and also operations and management across many units where we sustain and also serve, yeah. I can give you an example of a use case that we are focused on, like for example, climate action. We use sentiment analysis of data to diagnose the stability and identify the risks in conflict regions. Like for example, if there is an election that is happening, or if there is a recent disaster, or if you take this example of earthquake that happened, how do you use data that is sustainable and that's shared across the board with a commonality around how do you calculate these risks ahead of time is one of the use cases for climate action. And when it comes to gender equality, how do we use data to identify bias in data? Like, you know, for example, if you look at the pharmaceutical testing, or when it comes to decision making of who gets the credit card, when credit card gets issued based on your credit score, the gender component of that should be embedded in the data and also in the decision-making process, because that kind of introduces an unnecessary bias in making the decision based on a gender. So these are some of the focused use cases that essentially brings data into a sustainability use cases. See, we cannot solve all the problems in the world because the definitions of sustainability is so different for different contexts, and different sort of countries also understand sustainability differently, right? But that doesn't mean that we don't pay attention to data for good or data for sustainability. The only best next action that we can do is focus on use cases, essentially problems that are addressing specific outcomes that drives the sustainability in that aspect. So be it climate action, COVID-19 response, or be it gender equality, right? Like, so those are sustainable development goals based topics that drive action that essentially uses data to drive action. So those are some of the examples.
Thank you, everybody. That personally unlocked a whole bunch of questions for me. The answers led to more questions, which is always amazing. And so with that in mind, I would love to invite any attendees in the audience to head over to our microphone on the stand, or raise your hand if you have any questions that you would like to ask the panel as a whole or any specific member or members of the panel. Don't be shy.
Let's give it up to our first person. Yeah, come on.
Hi, everyone. First of all, thank you for coming down and giving us the time. It's been really interesting. A question I have about data. You see data like penetrating our lives in so many ways now. In particular, you see some of the big tech companies going more into health and like monitoring things like the color of your skin or really quite personal things. And I wanted to get your opinion on the ownership of data. As data becomes more and more personal and more intrusive, do you see the model of who owns the data and who sells the data shifting more toward the individual? As it, you want to, at least if people are knowing, what color your skin is, or how many, like the nutrition of your blood level, maybe you want to have some ownership of that. So I want to get your thoughts on that.
So is that a Web3 question? So yeah, I mean, it's unfair. The amount of money companies like Facebook and Google and Amazon make on the data we provide is incredible, and we don't have any part of it, and we don't always choose what data is being used or saved, and sometimes it's very convenient, and sometimes it's kind of spooky. So one of the things I think the drivers around technology that's emerging in Web3 is ownership of your own data. And you have the key to your data, and if you want to share, you share, and if you want to sell, you sell, and you make the money, not the companies, or you don't. Obviously, there is a whole around medical and where you don't want to share data, but it's, again, under your control, who you share it with, and you own it. And some of the examples, actually, I've heard yesterday at a different event, was that a woman had an accident in one place, and she needed to have her records transferred to that hospital, and her doctors would not release her information to her. They would only release it to the hospital that happened to be in Mexico. That took time, so she was waiting for an operation for a while for that to be released. And obviously, you have a much better, if you have key to your own information, it's a much smoother project. So forget the money portion of it, it's just much better. So I think the technology that's coming up in Web3 and like blockchain based, there is a lot behind it. And I'm not talking about cryptocurrencies, by the way. This is not about cryptocurrencies. That's about the technology and ability to own this and share how you want it to be shared, but not when you don't.
Yeah. So I live and breathe this every day. So when patients go to clinical trials, you have to sign consents that say, what can you do with the data? So 25 years ago when these trials were done, these consents were written based on the science you knew then. Fast forward today, you have genomic data being accumulated in trials, things like that, and the concept of consent almost resides in your DNA. Kind of, right? You didn't say that you should use DNA, you shouldn't say this. I mean, no one signed up for that. And identifiability is no longer your medical record. It's your genomic record, right? So I should have no reason to have your name there, but if your piece of DNA is flawed, it's not so scary, by the way. But people have made it to be scary, right? And there is possibility, I'm not denying that. So how do we go about this? And this is, and the reason I say I live and breathe it every day is there are policies. There is GDPR. There's all of these privacy policies that are there. But we need a good policy that doesn't index on the most conservative side, because there's value to be gained from this data. We are engaging patients to kind of write the consents. How best should we write? How should we appeal to your understanding? That's number one. Number two, regulators. How should all these regulatory agencies come together to craft more sane policies? And number three, technology. There are ways now in which you can use the data without really touching the data. The concept of I will give you data like candy probably doesn't exist. The data sits somewhere, but I can run algorithms on it without really seeing the data, right? So technology is coming to our advantage. Yes, ownership and there are companies that are actually brokering the ownership of your own data. There are new patient platforms that come that say, okay, load your data here, and you push a plug and say who you want to send it to, right? Push a button. But I think it needs a healthy balance of policy, technology, people's ownerships, etc., because there is value in it. If we end up being very scared and like many others who have closed their Facebook accounts and things like that, the value that you want out of this will never be extracted. So it's a good community dialogue that we must have. Regulators, technology people, users, contributors, everyone, and see how best to take it forward.
Great job. Let's go to the next question.
Hi, I just wanted to say thank you firstly. My name is Alicia, and I do politics and economics at the London School of Economics in London. And I want to apologize in advance because I get told that I talk too much, and this is going to be a long question. But Yeah, despite not having a technical background, I'm super interested in like algorithmic inequality and data biases. So I found it really interesting when you're all talking about how policies can be restrictive in terms of the data that you can access, and also about increasing transparency, and then the lack of global cooperation. That's obviously an issue for competitiveness. And I've done a few research projects on this, and I had a look at, for example, Uber's pricing algorithm, and I found that they actually charge higher fares if you're driving into a black neighborhood, which some of you are nodding your heads about. And it's not like it's intentional, but it's just the data that's being used. And then also like with recruiting algorithms like HireView, which are meant to like remove racism from the interviewing process, can actually be even worse because they're using data to hire for culture fit, which is obviously an issue if you have an office full of people just from a single university or people of a single race. And my question is like, how do we think of solutions around this and solving like algorithmic inequality? Because on the one hand, you can have government policies to increase transparency, which, you know, damage competitiveness for a company. On the other hand, people say leave it to consumer pressure, but is that ever enough? And then you alluded to secondary algorithms to kind of identify the biases, but then does that not like further black box problems? So it's kind of a big question, but I just wanted your thoughts on that. Thank you.
Yeah, if I could take a stab and then jump in there. I think it starts with the makeup of the organization. Is your organization have a diverse point of view? Like in the room, do you have folks that have diverse points of view that can even acknowledge and recognize that there's a bias in the data? That's a starting point. And so I think corporations need to think about who's in the room working on this, and then think about their ability to do that. Secondly is understand that there is a possibility of bias in model shift and all those kind of things. And you want things to be automatic? Well, model shift based on the data you input into them. And so having checkpoints around model shift and bias is a big deal. The third piece is going back to what question are you trying to answer? And is the thing that you're measuring a true indicator that will drive better decision making for you? So I think those three basic things is a good foundation for how we as enterprises reduce bias.
That was a very good question. Thank you. Ma'am, would you like to go next?
Hi, I'm Esma. I'm from the Netherlands. I study CS and economics at Minerva University in San Francisco. And you briefly mentioned blockchain, which is kind of what my question was about. It sounds like a lot of the struggles or challenges around data have to do with immutability, consensus mechanisms, which all partially have a solution in blockchain. I'm curious to know how much of your infrastructure is already integrated in blockchain, and whether you see a bigger move to blockchain or whether you're pivoting away from this technological solution.
There are multiple dimensions of problems related to data. Some of them are technology-based, some of them are cultural, some of them are business. So yes, blockchain is a very promising technology that I'm personally very excited about. And it does solve some of the data governance problems that we deal with day to day, and also depends how it's used, because you can pretty much use everything badly. Like in my experience, I've gone through many database technologies, and you can use really simple ones really well, and really good ones really badly, and it doesn't help very much. But in terms of large financial institutions, moving to blockchain ain't happening yet. I think it's more on the new companies, fintech, that are bringing it in. Also, there is still a lot of technology that has to be developed around usability, accessibility, security, and so on of blockchain. I cannot pronounce this word. Can you please do this for me?
Interoperability.
Thank you. That's not a word that I can. Like yesterday, there was conversation about metaverse, and I wanted to ask a question, and I couldn't ask the question. Anyway, so a lot of challenges still to be solved, but I think, yes, it's a very exciting technology that should help. It's no technology ever solves every single problem, because a lot of the problems are people and not technology. So I wish it were that simple.
Any other thoughts on her question? Anusha?
Yes, I would like to share some use cases where we do leverage blockchain technology in understanding how we want to track the donor contribution. That kind of gives us the lineage. So data lineage is something that definitely blockchain facilitates much better. And there is also this digital identity, the concept of digital identity. How do we want to keep track of refugees and the immigrants who are migrating where there is lack of identity for individuals? So we end up using blockchain as one of our tracking facilitating modality. And then also to add on to your question, Alicia, how do you make sure that biases are not inbuilt in the approaches that we are considering, be it machine learning driven or data driven, is to have the concept of human in the loop. What I mean by human in the loop is the approaches that you consider to solve for these problems. How are you choosing those approaches, be it supervised machine learning approaches or unsupervised approaches, making sure that the decision-making process or the endpoint has the human in the loop embedded in your process, and the decision-making kind of helps you mitigate the biases that gets built in, be it fallacy bias or be it gender bias or be it the data capture bias. The biases are things that we have to live with, but there are ways to mitigate it.
All right, ma'am.
Hi, thank you for being here. My name is Daisy Burns, and I'm a junior at the University of New Hampshire studying economics and sustainability. And my question is more specifically for BlackRock. This semester, I've been doing some research with my university on net zero investing for the endowment. And a conversation that we've been having is whether or not the limited data that we have access to is sufficient for investment decisions. And there's been a lot of really helpful information on this panel about how to use data for decision making. But I'm curious on the flip side, if you have advice on when not to use data, when the data isn't comprehensive enough, reliable enough to base decisions on, and actually could cause problems. And I'm just curious if that's something that you run into, and if that's a distinction that you make between data you would use for decision making and data you wouldn't.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it touches on some of the points I think I made earlier on discussing the concept of ESG and the point at which data actually is able to answer some of our questions. So have you heard of the concept of sustainable financing or sustainable investment as well?
Yeah.
So, nowadays there's a sustainable investment, for those who are not familiar with the term, it's the concept of incorporating ESG into long-term investing decisions, right? And so now a lot of companies are going through that process, and as BlackRock is an asset manager, BlackRock wants to be investment friendly to organizations that are investing their money in and actually trying to improve the world through whatever it may be, environmental, social, governance decisions, et cetera. And so in many ways, BlackRock wants to be a fiduciary, right? Our CEO, Larry Fink, you'll hear him say that word in every single interview that he ever does, fiduciary. And so BlackRock has to make decisions that are best for its clients. And that's really the heart of what fiduciary is. And so in many ways, firms like BlackRock, not just BlackRock, are going to be incentivized to make decisions based on ESG data points. There's also, as I mentioned before, regulatory requirements for various public companies, especially those in the European Union. And so for those items, for those companies, and the items that are required to be transparent, BlackRock has to use data points to make its investment decisions. It has to analyze those, and now it's actually an initiative internally to leverage more external environmental data as we make our various investment decisions. So, hope that helps.
Can I add something to that? So, I think and whether it's investment or anything else, how do you know the data is good to be used for whatever decisions you want to make? And this is when these concepts that have traditionally been in data management spaces, people in the business haven't really tuned their thinking to these concepts. They have always remained in the world of data management, IT, technology, things like that. And those are concepts like quality of data quality, provenance of data, where did you get the data from? Those are concepts that have always been people who traditionally work with data know it, but the people who are most equipped to truly contribute and understand what it means for their data are the people in the business. What have you seen of this quality of data? How do you see this varying today versus tomorrow? Are there spaces there in your data collection that are good and bad? Those are things that come with experience. Those are things that you will know the more you work with data, Yes, there are infinite number of algorithms not algorithms, even profiling, data profiling, right? Looks through scans of data and says, how good is your data? Where is the missing pieces of data? Things like that. That is one way to get to it, but the business folks, I find, need to be more invested in that approach and understand that it is a thing to do. It is not just a data management thing to do. There is value in why you do it. And this is where I think we need the combination of the people that understand the business, the people that understand data approaches, all of them coming together to generate value out of data.
All right. Well, thank you very much, ma'am. And so with that, we're going to do a very quick lightning round. And here's the question. So, Julie, you can go first. And Nisha requested she was last. And so if you could speak to your 21-year-old self, what advice would you give to yourself? So why don't you go first?
Yeah, I'll try not to be too long. So just for context, my degree was in math, and I was good. And one of the things that happens, well, at least happened to me, I was very arrogant about it, because if I could do that well, I could do everything else well. So what I would tell to my 21-year-old is that people are much more complex than math. So I think it's kind of self-explanatory. So,
yeah. What I would say is be open. I think I was, but it's probably something and look for serendipity. Look for translator. I love the word translator, because if you saw, the way I moved through my career is really because of the ability to translate between skill sets, domains, what have you. And I find people asking this question, what should my career path be? There is no one career path, especially these days. It comes and goes. It's in a flux. Pick up the things that you're best at, and there will always be something for you.
That's a really good advice there, right there. What I would say is, get your foundations right. Don't skip that class, because it doesn't matter what you do. If your foundations are shaken, you can't success in anything. Forget about data or anything else, right? So it doesn't matter how long it takes. Make sure you focus on that. You spend time on it, and that's what I would really go for. Just one prediction that I would leave everybody with. We all know that 90% of the data that we see today was created in the last 3 to 5 years. That's fine. But going forward, if I see a little bit, what's going to happen is in the next 3 to 5 years, every organization's data is going to double probably every 12 hours. So think about that as the data volume explosion, the opportunities that it comes with. It's not just managing this data, it's about how do you get value out of this data? How do you manage this kind of volume ingestions? So there's a lot happening there. Unless your foundations are strong, you won't be able to address this kind of issues, right? So that would be me. Thank you.
Great. I'm sure my advice will resonate with everyone here because you're in this room and you're already doing this, but continue to be proactive in exploring networking opportunities, job opportunities, continuous learning opportunities, whether informal or formal. Once you're working, try to find a sponsor, wherever job you are. Try to find a sponsor that knows the value that you bring to the company, and build a good work relationship with them, but also personal relationship, and make sure they help you throughout your career. Working is not an individual journey, it's a team journey. So make sure you're invested in the success of the broader team. And just find balance as well. Make sure you understand what's important to you, and your priorities, especially as you mature. It's not always just going to be about chasing money or chasing a certain goal. It's going to be about balancing your time and making sure you increase the quality of your life holistically.
Just a couple things. I'm a strong believer in this notion of karma, right? In that if you do good, it will come back to you. And so when I think about that, I mean, everyone in this room has certain means and is pretty lucky. And so when I think about that, I'm always, my younger self, I would tell them, think about how you're contributing to the people around you. And ask yourself, am I helping? If I'm not, how can I? So when you go to someone, it shouldn't be, hi, I'm blah, blah, blah. It's, hi, tell me about yourself. Hi, how can I help you? Should be the starting point. And then the other sort of component is you got to be good technically at stuff. So you can't take the easy way out, because there's a lot of people who fly at 100,000 foot level, but when it comes to the doing part, they kind of suck, right? You all know that, right? There's people in your classes, they talk a good game, but when it comes down to executing, they don't actually do any work. And I got to tell you, the folks who actually can do the work and don't need 5 people around them to do the work, they will move fast in life.
This is the most difficult part. I wish I chose the first slot. Yeah. What would I say to my 21-year-old self is that I always thought, like, if I graduate, my learning is done, and that's it. But that's not true. That's an assumption that I had to relearn, or what do you call unlearn. Learning is continuous. It doesn't matter how old you are, in which journey you are in your career. As long as you continuously have a learning mindset, that will help you. Doesn't matter to switch your career or move on to a different kind of an industry, or if you're very much focused on changing the world, learning is the best bet that you can take, yeah? And the second sort of idea that I wish I knew when I was 21 years old, rightly so by how Ben mentioned it, is that choose a career that makes you wake up every day and go and do what you want to do. Yeah, the career can be anything, even if you're focused only on social media marketing, and if that is something that makes you wake up every day and do that every single day, that means you're in the right path, yeah, whatever that might be, yeah. So I wish somebody gave me that pointer. So thank you.
Well, I guess I will share, if I would speak to my 21-year-old self, a couple things. Number one, when I was younger, as Anusha said, when you graduate college, you kind of, you think, oh, I got this great knowledge, I have this degree, and I'm ready to go. And when you're younger, being smart will help you, without a question. But as you get older, you have to have relationships and build a network. You have to grow your emotional side, your relational side of your career. And the second thing is you got to be, you have to have a heart to serve and love other people. You can't be a taker. You have to be a giver. And I remember when we launched the magazine up at MIT back in 2019, I stood on a stage much like this, and I gave everybody my personal telephone number. And I said, hey, if I can help you, if I can serve you, if I can do something to help impact your career, your life, what you're doing with your company, I'd be happy to do it. So I'm going to give each person my personal cell. If you want to text me, and if I can help you in some way, let me know what it is. And if I can do it, I will. So it's ready? It's 513-405-6822. When my wife wants me to go to the grocery store, this thing rings. So anyway, so thank you. Fletcher, great job as the moderator, right? Come on now. And how about to our esteemed panel, all these wonderful data, global business leaders, and also to all of you. What's it? Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. So it's an honor to be here today at Princeton, and you all have a great, great future in front of you. You're just on mile one of your journey, and it's not going to be easy, but if you stick with it, great things can happen. So anyway, thank you for being here today.